Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien. This is episode number 132. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, commented, who continues to support the show. All that support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guests today. Also, want to take this time to thank our sponsors. Family owned and operated since 1976, Samson Equipment has been specializing in full turnkey weight room buildouts from planning to installation. Based in Las Cruces, New Mexico, Samson provides professional weight room solutions for those looking to lead the way in advancing our strength and conditioning profession. Coaches have relied on Samson as their top resource for all their weight room renovations because they provide the finest materials and design, product customization, and the most reputable customer service in the business. If you're in the market for elite level strength equipment, weight room renovations, or upgrades, be sure to check out samsonequipment.com to see how Samson has been delivering clients a long-lasting yet affordable product for over 4 decades. Also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. Owned and operated by active lifters, Cerberus is trusted by the top strength sport athletes and lifters in the world. Cerberus's wide range of products are made by athletes for athletes, truly living up to its moniker, made by the strong for the strong. So if you're in the market for the highest quality strength conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to use our promo code strength_game at checkout to receive 10% off your next order at cerberusstrength.com. Also want to thank our sponsor, Sport Kilt. Whether it's competing in Highland Games, connecting with your heritage at a family gathering or wedding, or just casually spending some time around the house or wanting to stand out from the crowd, sport kilts are made for everyone and every occasion. Founded in 1995, Sport Kilt is the very first company to begin making casual kilts in the USA. So if you want to make the ultimate Celtic statement, be sure to check out the full selection of kilts and stylish kilt accessories at sportkilt.com. And be sure to use our promo code TSG to save at checkout. And in this week's episode, I am joined by Brandon Reyes. Brandon is an assistant football strength and conditioning coach at Colorado University. Reyes came to Boulder in 2023. In addition to his coaching responsibilities, he coordinates and oversees the sports science integration for the Buffs football program. He spent the previous season as an assistant director of football strength and conditioning at Purdue University and 2 seasons as the assistant strength coach at Army West Point, working with the football program from 2020 to 2022. Reyes got his coaching start at the University of West Florida as an intern before being promoted to graduate assistant coach from 2018 to 2020. While at UWF, he was a part of the football team that won the 2019 Division II National Championship. He also garnered experience as the football strength conditioning coach at Fort Walton Beach High School and Booker T. Washington High School in Florida. Reyes is a lifelong athlete, avid training enthusiast, and former competitive Olympic weightlifter. He continues to remain deeply invested in his own training through primarily Olympic weightlifting, all while using his own training to find the best approach to impact the student athletes he works with and stay active daily. Like I said, I'm excited to have him on the show today. So, with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Brandon Reyes. What's going on, everybody? Today I've got Coach Brandon Reyes on the show. What's going on today, man?
What's up, man? Happy to be here.
Hey, I'm excited to nail you down and actually get some time to spend with you. I know as we're kind of recording this, you're in the thick of starting off that spring season developmental with the new football team, all right, and kind of seeing what guys shake out with all the kind of new rules and playoffs and stuff. And we're definitely going to get into all the training and kind of how the unique side of what you guys do over there with the Buffaloes over at Colorado Boulder. But before we kind of get into all that coaching stuff, how did you kind of get involved in the strength game and lifting? Like, what kind of fueled your passion to get started training that ultimately kind of led you into a career coaching?
Yeah, I was played football, ran track, weightlifting in high school. In the state of Florida, we have competitive weightlifting. So, that was kind of the culture I was brought up in. And um kind of going into college, I knew that I wanted to do something related to that. I knew that was going to be my skill set. Um, what I was passionate about. Didn't know at the time you could make any money in strength and conditioning, and a lot of people argue you still can't, but you can. But I enrolled University of West Florida. I kind of go. I'm coaching, volunteering at a high school at the time, just kind of doing stuff just through connections I had in high school and things like that. Um, and really, that was just to kind of get some experience and really know what I wanted to do. Went through like my first week of classes. I was plan was to go physical therapy. Thought that would, make me some money. Went through my first week of classes and was like, this is not for me. So immediately went and changed everything. Went the exercise science route, and probably not long after that, I saw that iconic video of Scott Cochran running around yelling at everybody back at Bama. So I was like, man, this looks like it's a blast. Like I can just hang out all day, train guys. I don't really, working with guys on the front end rather than, getting guys that are hurt, whatever it is. I was like, wow, that's a profession. Like that's a job. So after that, I kind of reached out to Kent Morgan. He's the director at University of West Florida. Just kind of came in, showed up one day and was like, hey, like I just want to get experience. So from there, kind of kept going through that. I'm working at a gym here, making a little bit. Like I said, I worked for about 2 years, kind of just volunteering in high school, two different high schools. Um, Learned a ton there. Nobody really watching me do what I'm doing, and I got a bunch of these high school kids, so learned a lot throughout that process of like, all right, take a lot of the stuff that I want to do out and focus on the basics, everything like that. So kind of learned that really early on. Um, but yeah, so then fast forward to like my sophomore year of college, I'm like, all right, I want to start getting involved here. So Coach Morgan was gracious enough, let me kind of come in. So I'm shadowing, working, gym, working high schools, doing all that all at the same time, just kind of juggling it all. Um, Went on to do my actual internship there. He was like, look, I'm give you a GA spot, if that's what, you want to do. So I graduated early, crammed all my classes into that last semester and got out of there a year early, then started GA. And at the time, like me being a young coach, not knowing anything, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to do this. I want to go do a big time internship with football somewhere else. I want to go to, one of these other places. And for whatever reason, it didn't work out. And that kind of was still on the table. And it was probably the best thing that could have happened for me just because the way it's set up, lower level school, Division II, you get a lot more responsibility. You get to program your own teams. You get to, talk to coaches. You get to talk with your athletic trainers. Um, and the way Coach Morgan ran it was really great for us as GAs, excuse me, because we got to really feel like we were full-time coaches already. And so that was kind of my first, foot into the collegiate sector was that. And once I got into that, I mean, like it just solidified everything that I had like up to that point had looked at. I'm like, this is a blast. I'm making hardly any money. It doesn't matter. Like this is a blast. Like I'm here all day. Like I'm training with the guys. Like, we're coaching these guys. Like I'm around good people, great coaches, really smart people. My sport coaches were great. So that's kind of how I got into it was, I didn't really know a lot about the profession. I think the way people do now, it wasn't even that long ago, but there's so much more, media attention. There's so much more emphasis on what we do now that I think it's a little bit easier to kind of see that as an avenue. For me, we didn't really see that as much. So, like I said, it all kind of goes back. I saw that video, Coach Cochran, and I was like, man, this looks like a blast. I need to find out how I can do this.
Yeah, there's some of those videos and kind of shedding some light on what specifically like collegiate side of strength conditioning was doing. Those were some of probably the first kind of peeks behind the curtain for a lot of people that were maybe in your same shoes that while you're considering physical therapy, athletic training, personal training, whatever it kind of ended up being, that this is like an actual viable option. Like that was kind of pretty synonymous to like what mine was. And I know a lot of coaches where they're going to school, they want to stay involved in sports. And like I went to my first day for like athletic training and I talked to my advisor and they said I was going to be there 5 years. And I was like, hell no. I did
Yeah.
not want to do this. And
Yeah.
I like walked past the weight room that day and I like asked if I could help out. And that was perfect. And yeah, being on the front end and kind of working with athletes before they're injured, like it's great that so there's athletic trainers and there's other people out there in those professions. It's just it's not my cup of tea at all. And it's good that you kind of found that thing. But differently than kind of a lot of coaches in the beginning, like as you were like going through school and you were starting exercise science and everything, you were already like working with high school athletes. And I think a lot of coaches will look for maybe some of those higher level like internships, which every internship, every school you're going to go to, you're going to get different experience. But for you, like you kind of got to practically apply it right away. And let's be honest, you can't really mess up high school kids if you just stick
No.
to like meat and potatoes. And
No.
they're bulletproof, so you can pretty much do anything you want with them and trial stuff. So that's probably a perfect thing for a GA. But what kind of like really helped like in that timeline? Like how did you kind of keep it super simple with the high school kids? Because I mean, you obviously had an in where you're able to kind of work with them, but at the same time, like you could try to correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably were super, super raw when it come to the coaching side. So like, how do you kind of keep it in check when you're first starting out? Because it almost seems like if you're in that position, you're really just like you're like the senior high school kid. You're like the biggest kid there, so everybody's gonna flock to you. How do you like kind of set the boundaries as a coach, but also understand like you're really new to this?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I think, and I think it applies no matter where you're at or what point of your career, I think is how you walk into a room, how you carry yourself. If you come in confident and you can control a room from right away, then it doesn't matter. Um, I think the biggest thing is that you're there to provide a service. So even in high school, it was, yeah, I'm not that much older than some of those guys, like, I'm still in college, but my thing was like this is a professional thing for me. Like this is like I'm gonna treat this like it's the biggest job that I have. And I've kind of taken that approach everywhere. Like until the next job comes, this is the biggest job that you're gonna get. So and it could be the only job that you have. So like to me, it's like make the best of where you're at. And I think the kids can see that no matter how much they recognize it or not, like kids are gonna see through, you know, if you're trying to be their friend or if you're trying to, whatever it is, they're going to see through it. But yeah, I mean that immediately I knew like I had to, and I'd been around good coaches, private sector, like actual Olympic lifting coaches, guys that did stuff, guys that had been at the next level and coach. So I had been around, I had a good network of people to kind of model myself after. And so I knew how to kind of go in and approach it. And I knew like, all right, just because this is high school, doesn't mean it has to be any different than any other level. And yeah, I screwed a lot of things up. I mean, I did too much, tried to do, from year one to year two, cut, I mean, probably more than half of the stuff out. And if I went back and looked at that program now, I'd probably scrap it entirely and do something even more basic, right? Um, but like you said, like not many people get that opportunity to kind of learn on your own and not have somebody put an ideology or a way of doing it into your head. So I just kind of had the tools that I had. To me, training was a big deal. I mean, ever since middle school, our middle school coach, we had weightlifting for football and all that stuff. So like, it had always been a serious thing for me. So leaning back on all that experience, I kind of just went from there. But, I messed a lot of things up, but I think a lot of it was just learning how to communicate, like really refining like how you communicate with a kid. Cause I mean, there's guys that I had there that would teach them how to you're doing A skips and you got to tell the kid every single week to have opposite arm opposite leg, so what I mean, you're dealing with a whole different animal. So but I think that's a huge deal, and I think like the stigma of people getting into it now wanting the fast track to get to the top is not the way to go. Like you're going to get to the top because of the people that know you, people that you work for, and the impression you make on them, right? Excuse me. But like that's important, like going at the smaller levels, like I said, I GA'd at Division 2, like, and that was some of the best experience I had. Being around that, being in the high school level. Then I went to West Point, that's, you're not a Power 4 level, whatever it is. Um, but you can learn so much from all those places because you're dealing with less resources, whatever the case is, you have a lot more constraints. Um, and like I tell our interns, it's not about how fast you get there, it's being able to stay there. Right. You can climb the ladder real quick. You can get up to this level. There's you got great connections, somebody gets you in the door, but where do you go from there? Are you going to be the last guy on the staff for 10 years? Or are you going to be when a guy leaves, are you going to get bumped up because of your skill set, your experience, what you bring to the table? Um, you know, are you valuable? So I think all that stuff is important, and you learn that coming up through the ranks, from the lower levels. And I think that's really important. And I don't think people need to look down on it. I mean, I get, there's obviously a huge financial barrier to getting into, the profession. And a lot of us have gone through it, but if you can do it and you can get through it and you can really learn from it, you're going to set yourself up for so much more long-term success.
Yeah, I'd agree. Like I was a GA at a D3 level too, so like I understand those constraints and everything too. And like I'm pretty biased when it comes to like looking towards interns or like looking at potential other coaches to join the staff. And when I see that, like I know back in the day, a lot of times that would be almost like a mark, like a bad mark on your resume. But to
Mhm.
me, it was always like this is a great mark because, like you said, there's time constraints, there's resource constraints. Like a lot of time GAs are getting thrown to the wolves. They're working with so many teams at that level because you might be all that's on staff.
Mhm.
So they've got the coaching reps, they've got the experience communicating with athletes, with staff and everything too. Like it's a full-time job without some of maybe like the administration and like maybe desk work that you would normally get. And maybe they're not as polished in that first year, but they got a lot of those reps out of the way that if you put them in an entry level job, like they're going to kick ass right away. And it's very different, but I like what you said too, like about going to the high school level too, and like obviously still having connections being in school at like UWF at that time, but you weren't necessarily like influenced like by an ideology right away. And I think a lot of times some of the interns look for an internship and then they either go to school there or try to go somewhere close, which obviously conveniency and financial reasons like makes a big point, but if you go there and you kind of just absorb everything that that staff does, you just kind of become a carbon copy of them unless you actually like venture out or you start using what they're saying and applying it with your own clients, like at a personal training clinic, at a high school, or something else on the side, versus like just kind of regurgitating what you hear from the first coach that you're from. So I think that's a huge experience. And like obviously you've had more experience like working with a lot of mentors at different places. Like how is like that kind of benefit and not only just career progression for you, but like kind of refining your coaching technique by being able to have some positions at West Point, Purdue, and now Colorado as well.
Yeah, I think everywhere you go, you can learn something from everybody. Like I said, a lot of people say it's really important to pick the correct mentor, right? I was lucky and lucked out, and my first one is Kent Morgan. He's a legend. He's been in the field for longer than a lot of us have been alive. So, and he's in that group of people that kind of came up when this was early starting, like really getting rolling. So, um, he's always said, we stand on the feet of giants or on the shoulders of giants, right? So like we are all the stuff that we're able to do now is because of all the stuff those guys did, decades before to pave the way for what we do, right? So there's a lot of value in sitting and listening with an open mind to what they are doing, why they're doing it. Because you may look at it and I think you should be critical. You should obviously be critical, but um coming into it with a mindset of like, okay, why though? Like, why is he doing that? There's got to be a reason. These guys that have been in it for so long, they don't do anything for just to do it, right? So you have to find what the reason is. And then from that, you might gain some perspective. Early on, like I was, let's do, X, Y, and Z. We're gonna do it this way. But all right, he's doing it this way because that's what these kids can handle right now. That's what they're mentally they can process and make the most of, right? So you learn a lot of that stuff. And then from there, I think the biggest thing that I see a lot of young guys do incorrectly is when they are critical of something, trying to make a change too early, right? Like when I got to West Point, that was very different from what we did at West Florida. You can do a lot of the same movements, but the philosophy was slightly different in how we trained, how we structured everything. How Coach Hughes does it is, I mean, he's one of the best in the country. Um, and but it's very simple, super basic, but we're going to be technicians on everything. So seeing that, it's like, okay, this is way different. Why is he doing it this way? Let me see. To me, it's like, let me give it some time. Let me see how this works out. Instead of coming right off the bat, it's like, hey, we should change this or do this. I think that's where some people get frustrated or whatever the case is. To me, to make the most out of the mentor relationship is you have to have some give and take. You need to sit there and learn for a little bit, see how it's working, and then from there you can provide some insight like, hey, I'm seeing it this way. Well, what about this? Have you thought about this? Um, so from a technical aspect, I think that's the biggest thing is like you can learn something from all these guys. Like everywhere I've been, I was like, okay, like I probably wouldn't do that. This is really good though. I like the way he, demonstrates this or how he explains this. Even the way they talk and command the room. Like I've been around probably, four different guys that are totally different in the way that they present something to the team, the way they talk, the way, I mean, everything. Some guys are high all the time. Some guys are kind of up and down, but on purpose, right? So how you manipulate and how you communicate to guys um, is another thing that's really important if you can look for it and find it, right? But yeah, I mean, I think that's a big thing. And to me, like as an assistant, our job is to make the head guy's job easier, right? Like you don't know what it's like until you get into that seat. So our job is to facilitate everything else, right? So take stuff off of his plate as much as you can, have things set up, figure out, all right, there's a flow issue, try to figure that out before he even gets in, like set things up, correctly just so it runs smooth so he can do what he's paid to do, and that's run the room, right? And I think the more you do that, the better relationship you have with that person. And then that kind of feeds into, like you said, the whole career path, right? Like those people will go out of their way to, get you on a visit with somewhere else or get you an interview here. Like if somebody calls them, like they're going to give them somebody that they can trust, right? They're not going to recommend somebody that, they might be a great the smartest guy in the room, but like, hey, you didn't stock the fridge today. Like, you didn't clean up the weight room or you can't set anything up correctly. I got to come back behind you and set it up. So I think like that's a big thing with mentors too, is like they need to trust you first and foremost. Um, and then from there, then you really start to see kind of how everything works.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Like you're kind of looking for those mentors, especially at any point in time in your career. It doesn't have to be just in the beginning. Like if you have some goals set in mind, like a lot of guys that are on football staff, obviously, I would say probably the majority of everybody on that staff at some point in time wants to be the guy running the show. And you're setting yourself up by every single day what you do in your actions and kind of taking some of the work off the plate of the head guy because you're learning throughout the process, like what you're really good at, what you excel at, and then like the rest of the assistants are kind of hopefully covering down on maybe what you're not best at, and the head coach is just trying to kind of facilitate and put the members of the staff in the right position. So ultimately the team is successful. Like kind of as you go through that process too, like how do you kind of look for feedback or like try to maybe like steal ideas or learn from even members on your staff? Because I think a lot of times coaches end up looking outwardly from like what they already have like in their backyard, which is like maybe resources that are at the school, professors, sports scientists, whatever you already have access to. And it's different at every school. Like sometimes you have to go out, or like I know like for me sometimes with other coaches it feels like a passing ship. because there's only one full-time coach for every team. It's just
Mhm.
how it works. But football, you got the five, you guys are always together. You know when you're on, you know when you're off on those days. So how do you kind of look for maybe feedback from your mentor currently or like in the past to like kind of facilitate career growth for yourself and so that you makes you ready not only in the job you're at, but like maybe future down the line if you want to take a head job.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me it goes beyond just the mentors too. Like, I've been around, really great guys that I've worked with too that are, in the same boat. Everybody's trying to move up. Like everybody wants to be in the head seat. So, you're talking to other guys, I mean, there's probably a group of 5 or 6 guys, including some mentors that I talk to pretty much every week. If not, like some of my mentors, it's probably like at least once a month, right? Just call to check in and just see how things are going. How are you guys doing? How's training going? Talk about how's the family doing. And you just kind of, just like we're doing now, we're just kind of going back and forth. And through that, you get to see because we get so caught up in our silo of what's going on. And we don't ever think to bounce it off of somebody else. And so there's times where it'll just come up, and I think that's what, even like the conference. So you go to the conference every year. I mean, it's probably bad. I probably shouldn't say this, but I haven't been to a talk since like the first time I've been to conference as an intern. And it's nothing against the speakers at all. It's just I get so much more value from hanging out with coaches that I know through social media or I know through just passing and meeting, previously, but we'll catch up and we talk about all this stuff. And I think there's a big stigma that like the guys with the big logos on their chest aren't willing to talk to you and aren't going to do that. And it's never been the case for me. Like these guys have always been these head guys, Power Four schools have talked to me for, 30, 45 minutes about, hey, why are we doing this? Or what are you guys doing? So I think that's a huge thing. And it's just kind of seeing what everybody's doing. And it doesn't always necessarily mean you need to apply it, but like seeing what people are doing and thinking, all right, how can I, is there a way for me to incorporate that? Is it worth me incorporating that? Is that something specific for them? And then, from like the career side of things, with the guys that I've worked with before, everybody's trying to move up. We're constantly sending each other's portfolios back and forth, right? So like, we're like, hey, look, this is what I would do. This is the presentation I'm going to give when I get an interview. Like, these are the things that I'm going to do. Here's how I'm going to structure my staff. This is my short list of guys. This is what it looks like. This is who I think I can get right now and whom I might not be able to, what their roles would be. So I think like in all this on and the downtime that you do have, it's kind of putting yourself into that seat. So for me, before, the first 2 years I've been here, I've programmed for an entire group. But before that, I always programmed alongside what the coach did, right? So I would write another program and maybe tweak some stuff and like, all right, this is maybe what I would do, and kind of putting myself into that situation of like, all right, if I got told, hey, tomorrow you need to be somewhere else to take on this new job, what are you going to do? What do you have in place, um, to get yourself started? And so I think that's a big thing that, that a lot of the guys that I talk to, we do. We're constantly thinking about what we can do to have ourselves ready to be really valuable in the job market, to have somebody like say, hey, I need that guy to be my head strength coach, right? Um, and I think like that's the biggest thing. Like you just got to talk to the people you trust. And there's a lot of great people in our profession, but there's also a lot of people that I probably wouldn't work with, or I wouldn't hire. You know what I mean? And that's not a knock against anybody, but like there's a small group of people that I mentors, guys that I've worked with, those assistants or whatever it is, that like I really trust and I know what they put into this profession, what their, the quality of their work, all those things, and how serious it is. So to me, it's having that network of people you can constantly call and catch up with, bounce ideas off of, see what they're doing, what issues are they dealing with, like we talked about before we got on the way the landscape of college football is changing. Everybody's dealing with different issues right now, and how are they approaching, solving a lot of these issues. So I think that's a really valuable thing to have, is just a small group of people that you really trust to kind of bounce things off of.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there's a ton of coaches out there like that are super successful, and there's definitely ones that people admire or they seek guidance for or like want to kind of do certain things and like emulate after them. But there's probably fewer like that are outside of your inner circle that are the ones that like you truly would trust like to if you were hiring or putting someone on a staff because a lot of coaches would agree. I think like there's even having the best person on staff, like you're trying to create an all-star team, like if they don't mesh together and you don't work well together, then it doesn't matter if they're the best coaches like on paper. You still have to kind of have the best team. And I think like what you're doing is like a great way to do it, like envisioning yourself, putting yourself in the seat, and you're not just kind of thinking about it like you're actually or going through the motions, you're actually like literally sitting down, like programming side by side, like how would you tweak this? Like it's still stuff that you can talk to the head coach about too and be like, hey, this is what I was thinking. I don't know if this will work. Maybe this is a good idea. And even if they don't take it, that's something you put in your bank when it's time is called because you're just as aware, like especially football or like basketball coaches and like some of these higher profile jobs, like you could get hired, you could get fired like on a Friday, interview for a job on Saturday and start work on Monday and move across the country. So if you don't have a plan in place, like ready to go, if someone calls at a moment's notice, you might get overlooked right away. So your plan has got to be like ever evolving. Your portfolio always has to be kind of updated. And it's not a kind of jump the ship sort of thing. It's you have a career progression, you have goals in mind. And if you're not prepared to like actually attack those goals when someone calls, you're going to lose an opportunity right away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, to kind of piggyback off of that, I mean, I think the things that you should be thinking about and tweaking should evolve as your career progresses, right? Like early on, it is the X's and O's, the programming, and after a while, that should start to get a little bit more solidified. Obviously, you should still be open to changing things, and but a lot of that is more influenced by some of the soft stuff, right? So like now a big part of the portfolio, especially in our world in football, is all right, how are you going to manage the team, right? Like, how are you going to like coaches all want the same thing. They want obviously guys to get better physically, but you want guys that are going to buy into the culture. You want disciplined guys, and you want guys that you want to retain guys, right? Especially with the transfer portal and things like that. So you have to be able to answer for all those things and apply it to how your coach wants to run that program. So obviously you're going to have your values, but those type of things I think are become more important. So being able to be flexible as your career progresses and figuring out and thinking about these things becomes, especially as the head guy, is going to become more important. So to me, like that becomes more of what I'm focused on, in the downtime. It's like, all right, I want to know as much about the administrative process that I can. You know, I've been fortunate here that I get, opportunity to do to put in the schedules, to do the scheduling, you know, I'm the one I coordinate with sports science and athletic training and to be able to manage with different departments and communicate and communicate with the people upstairs and all that stuff. So I think that becomes another thing that you have to have experience doing and you have to be confident to do it. So I think like that's something that you have to start to shift as you start to get your foot in the door and you start to move up is like, obviously if you're the last guy on staff, you're the entry level guy, you worry about just doing the small stuff first. But as you start to move up, like that needs to be a bigger part of your broader goal is to figure out, okay, like I've seen maybe some of the issues or some of the pitfalls that we have, administratively or how we communicate with one department. I need to make sure I have a plan for that when I go into this next job where I'm the guy in charge, where I need to make sure I'm communicating with every department. I'm making sure we're all on the same page. Everything is running smooth because if you got different parts of the organization pulling in different ways, and it's going to be really hard to get where you want to go.
Yeah, I think once you kind of get up higher, you kind of realize that there's a lot more kind of managerial roles that happen like within the organization and like a head coach or maybe someone in a higher seat than just like the lowest assistant on that staff is putting out a lot more fires than you didn't even know like existed at
Yeah.
that point in time. And you're kind of it's not that you're unaware of like what's going on. You're just trying to get up to speed. And some of those more tenured coaches that got a lot more experience than you, like some of the things that you're trying to learn and really focus on, like those kind of come natural and it just clicks a lot quicker. It's like I tell a lot of my younger coaches and like some of the interns coming in too, like I can program, I can do all this stuff like without even thinking. I can do it a lot quicker than you and I can get out. Meanwhile, they'll sit down and they'll take like 4 days to like write like a one lift program and like really kind of question it. I was like, I can get to that 95% in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's experience that allows you to get to that. But as soon as you get that experience, you start realizing that you're exposed to a lot more things that, unbeknownst to you, is another part of like the next level up job. So that it's great that you kind of get that exposure, and then as like time goes on, you gain more responsibility so that you can feel probably more prepared and confident that when a job comes around, like you're ready for that position. Because like for me, I would never even like put on my radar initially that, hey, maybe I should have a short list of guys I would hire. Because
Mm.
like for on the Olympic side, unless you're like a director, like that really doesn't come to mind because jobs don't turn over quite as often as that. And for football, like at a big Power Four school, like it might be a full turnkey, like it's Black Friday, everything's gone. Like
Yeah.
the whole staff is turned over. So that's definitely something like to have kind of in your back pocket and already be thinking about. So that just definitely different. But hey, you touched on a little bit, like kind of getting used to like working with different departments and everything. Like, what is your specific involvement like with sports science? I know you talked about coordinating it. I know you guys do a lot of different things to kind of analyze and kind of prepare like all your players for practice, but what do you kind of practically do to kind of like have the best combination between strength and conditioning side and sports science to kind of ultimately prepare the team?
Yeah. My roles kind of evolved over time. When I was at West Point, we didn't have a sports scientist. It was, we got catapult, we got this. You learn from the guy ahead of you to teach you how to do it, and then you just run it, right? So, it was a good experience there, learning that, and that was a great place to learn how to apply that. Jeff Monken is really big into the analytics and trying to get every single advantage he can. So that became a thing where we're presenting him with the numbers and letting him come to the conclusions, right? So that was a great spot for me to be in because it wasn't, hey, this is what somebody's telling me this is what the numbers say, and I have to go tell the coach, hey, you can't do this in practice today, because that will absolutely never fly in football. I don't care how good your relationship is. So what we did was just kind of educate and give them stuff slowly over time. Um, so coming here, going to Purdue, it was similar, kind of doing that, kind of started doing more force plate stuff. With the force plate stuff, it was pretty in depth, but it was more so just trying to identify like who was at risk of what. We didn't change a lot with their lifts, but it was more so, hey, let's get you back in here, let's get you in the training room, let's do whatever it is to try to you know, fix whatever we're seeing, or try to correct what we're seeing. And now here at Colorado, it was kind of a similar role. Up until last year, we got a sports scientist working with us. Tessa, she's great, works over with basketball too. So that is great for me because I am not a sports scientist. My Excel skills are very very elementary. So um, she makes our job a lot easier, kind of getting everything streamlined and updated pretty quickly. So my job now is to just say, hey, look, this is what we are seeing, or this is what we want to look at to identify, like we're having this issue. We're having the same injury pop up. Okay, so what can we do to identify that, and then how can we correct it? And then she does a great job of kind of speaking the language of both sides. So we'll use whatever the equipment is and we'll test everybody, or and now we have a pretty good system, with the transfer portal and how we recruited. We've kind of been put through the ringer as far as getting new guys in almost every semester. And then with that, it's a big challenge. You have to identify what their biggest risk factors are, and then how to approach that, right? The training doesn't change a ton. Like the most we've done is, all right, your force frame, NordBoard, force plate, all that stuff. At the most, it's been all right. There's one block at the end of the workout where these guys are deficient in these areas. You're just broken off on the TV. One group's going here, one group's going here, one group's going here. But we're all still doing. We're still going to squat. We're still going to clean. We're still going to hinge. We're going to do all that stuff, right? So it's just kind of little things, and then educating guys on how to get in and take care of their body, get in the training room. Um, yeah, my job now is like more so just facilitating all that stuff and getting us all to communicate. So she does all the work. She puts everything on the database, um and kind of my job is to see, all right, how this is the flow of things. This is how, the flow of practices, the flow of training, what's going to be the biggest issues, so having us all come together, athletic training, nutrition, sports science, we can all get on the same page as far as like, all right, what days we need to have what type of hydration out. What is our hydration testing process? Us at Elevation, we deal with a lot of different things from hydration and stuff like that, guys adapting to elevation. So it just puts us all on the same page. And then really my job is just to facilitate from what we see as a coach. And like we got to remember they're those other departments are in their different, kind of silos of what they do. And so it's kind of our job to bring them in and see like get them to understand the why of what we do and how we can all get on the same page. Because if we're all working together, it's a lot easier to spot things. It's easier to spot when a guy's body weight isn't where it needs to be. They can communicate that. I know immediately as soon as they get done with breakfast who had a red hydration test, right? Like I get all those updates right away. So I know if the dietitian can't catch him on the way down, I might be waiting for the kid when he comes out with whatever his protocol is for hydration or whatever it is. And, we can kind of, get a lot of those variables that are really easy to control, but are hard to apply with 105 guys. We can kind of cover those off a lot easier when we know like what the training is going to be. We know how it's going to run. We know what the head coach is looking for when we do things. And so it's easier for us to kind of communicate with everybody and get them all on the same page.
Yeah, that's great. It definitely helps having that as a resource. And I know sports science is like always a big topic when it comes to college strength conditioning. I mean, professional, I mean, damn near high school at this point, a lot of times too. But like what you're actually able to do with it, like what you can use the data for, like how often you're kind of testing, retesting. Like it really does depend on not only the resources you have available, the time you have available, but like who wants to like kind of invest in it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the problems is if you invest in it as a strength coach or an athletic trainer or whoever kind of takes the lead with that is you have to divide your time from what your main responsibility is. And it's it's a hard trade-off. And I think a lot of people try to take that on and they realize the amount of work that's entailed to get that information in a usable fashion that you end up like just putting in the corner and letting it collect dust or until like maybe down the line someone comes in and will really kind of run the show. But sounds like you guys have a pretty good trade-off with that and you're able to kind of decipher that information without it taken away from like what your priority is. And I guess when it comes to sports science too, like sometimes compliance is an issue. Like, does that ever become any sort of problem? Like with, because that a lot of times that's kind of eliminated with just from the top, like head coach and everything, like kind of laying the hammer down or making sure that the type of recruits and athletes you bring in, like you're going to do it this way. Does that ever kind of like cross the board when it comes to like maybe doing some of the extra work or like maybe the hydration or nutrition and things like that too?
Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate here. I say it all the time. Coach Prime is a lot like Jeff Monken in a lot of ways. Nobody would ever think that, but because of the way they present themselves are two probably polar opposites, but their values and how they run the program are exactly the same, right? You're going to do everything the right way, do it with great intensity. I mean, it's all the same. So I think I'm fortunate to be here because we have somebody that wants to run the program like that from the top, right? So everything, one of our core values is discipline, right? So if we can't do anything, if it's something as simple as like, hey, you have to check in at breakfast at this time and you have to, early enough so that you can eat and you have to do your hydration test before, practice so we know what your health is. I mean, if you can't do that, we can't trust you, right? So everything we do is obviously logged in so that we can, one, communicate with one another. So I can know right away who's at risk hydration wise. But we get a list too of guys that don't do it, right? And all we do with that is we just report it to the coaches. We give it to the coaches, the DFO, the GM, give it to the head coach. and be like, look, and we keep a really detailed log of where everybody's at, right? And it's not a thing to punish the kids at all, but what it is like everything about this program is a professional mindset, right? We have two Hall of Famers on the staff. You know, there's a multitude of guys that are on the staff that have had NFL experience, played in the NFL. So the ultimate goal for these guys is to get to that next level and teaching them now, like, hey, like this stuff will cost you money when you get there, right? Like you don't make your body weight or you don't do X, Y, or Z. Like they're going to fine you. So having that same mindset, I think, is important. And coach appreciates the fact that, like, hey, I want a detailed record of what these guys are doing. Like they missed a tutoring session. They, didn't grab their catapult today. They didn't weigh in, or they were late to breakfast, whatever it is. We just report it, just give it to them. And then from that point, then the coaches are reinforcing the same message that you're giving, right? So instead of always, it's not necessarily, hey, we're going to up down this kid till he pukes because he didn't do his hydration test, but it's like, all right, well, when you're mad about playing time or whatever it is, the coach is going to go back and he's going to like show you, all right, here's your MAs in practice. And then look back in the summer when you're constantly late, you're constantly missing breakfast. Here's all these things, right? You miss training, you miss treatment in the training room, whatever it is. So I think that's the biggest thing is keeping guys accountable. Like, look, it's not a game. It's not something that you can mess around with. Like, you have to take this stuff serious. It's your health that we're talking about. But really it's the stuff like that. Like, guys aren't going to get faulted for, not jumping on the force plate, because more than likely that's our fault. We didn't grab the kid, right? But it's all the other stuff, it's stuff that they can control. Are you at breakfast in time to eat? Our dietitian is up there making sure you're there to eat. And are you doing your hydration tests? And it's like, this is for your health. Like we're trying to keep you healthy. Want to make sure you're on the right track. So, it's definitely a lot easier with compliance and it gets better over time. And what you see too is I think it provides value for your personnel staff and your recruiting staff, right? Because once they see over time, like, hey, these are the kind of kids we need to recruit or the kids that are going to do all this stuff right. So we have a detailed log. Like I said, every day, that was what I was doing right before I hopped on with you, is like keeping track of like, all right, these guys are here, you know, who was late to breakfast, who did what. Like we got to keep track of all that because I think, you can talk about being disciplined, but you have to have some documentation of like this guy does this, this guy performs at this level, because that's how they grade them in practice, right? Like you graded out this practice, this is what you typically grade out at. And coach says it all the time. Like, if you're mad about playing time, then go ask your coach what your grade is for practice, right? So that's the biggest thing for us in our program is consistency and doing all the little things right. So, it makes it easy for us because we have that backing upstairs.
Yeah, that backing I think is probably the key to everything. Like it's hard as a support staff or any other like department that falls under like the coach and like kind of the higher leadership in that point. If if they're running it, if you're trying to run something differently than what they do or what they enforce or what they value, it's they're always going to rely on like what the coach does because the coach is the one that's going to give them their playing time.
Yep.
So you can, if they're not going to enforce it, then your kind of hands are tied in that point. But that's that professional mindset, like kind of that attention to detail and being able to hold them accountable to everything. Like I think that's huge, especially like seeing the landscape of how college is going and like you're in the thick of it. And I'm just kind of seeing or talk to friends that are on the inside or change jobs or kind of see the ramifications of what happened, but I don't see the day to day. But like, especially like at Colorado right now, just like the amount of exposure, kind of the pressure and everything is put on, like, I don't think there's many people that could do it the same way if you weren't holding them to such a high standard and you're tracking everything and they're disciplined in what they do because like with NIL and like all the money and like all the transfer portal stuff like that is easily getting out of hand at a lot of places. And it's because I think a lot of people don't want to hold these kids accountable. They don't want to hold their feet to the fire. So when they like cry wolf about something, they can easily transfer. They can do whatever they want. But if you want to be successful and you have people that have actually done it, have been in it, and actually want to like show you the ropes and show you that like you don't get to this level without this amount of work and this amount of effort, like then fine. Then it's an easy. We'll get someone in that actually
Yeah.
wants to do that. So it's great to kind of hear those things too, because I think that's what's starting to go missing when you start looking at now college athletics is getting far past amateurism.
Mhm.
Everybody is a semi-pro or professional athlete at this point, getting paid in some sort of way, whether it's just education, whether it's gear, I don't care, whether it's food stipends or you're making a couple $1 million on a sandal deal. I don't care. Like you're making money to play sports, like you're a professional now. And if you don't hold yourself accountable on that team, then like hats off to you, go somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, so I know it's a little bit different, like trying to train around all this stuff going on. Like I know you've switched a little bit. They spent a lot of time in like weightlifting from middle school, like on through high school, and like my hat's off. Like I've only been in Florida for like 4 years now, but I wish
Mhm.
like more places would actually have like weightlifting ingrained in kind of like the high school like setting. I'm sure Texas is probably doing it now, or
Yeah.
there's certain spots, but like what kind of kept you involved in it past just high school and everything, like because that kind of took over a little bit more than team sports, and then like what are you kind of still doing now, like to still kind of train yourself and stay competitive, like maybe head to head with the other coaches, like I know Coach Hughes does a lot.
Yeah.
But what are you kind of doing to like really stay like involved? Is weightlifting still kind of your main training tool?
For the most part, yeah, I kind of do like a little bit of everything. I mean, I'm not just purely doing Olympic lifting and, just sticking with that. I try to do a little bit of everything, just stuff that I enjoy doing. Um, but yeah, I mean, keeping me involved, that it's probably just more of an addiction than anything else. So, um, I'm pretty not very fun to be around if I haven't trained in the morning. So, that's the biggest thing. I mean, to me, it's like it's a mindset, and it's kind of a mindset that just kind of got instilled early on. Like my middle school football coach, I mean, I still talk to him often. He came to our game at UCF, and he's absolutely out of his mind. But I mean that was great. I mean, like that was somebody I needed to meet, early on in my life. And so I just kind of picked that up from there. Like, I mean, this is like something that you just always do. Like it should just be you should be as much as you can, try to put yourself into positions to do hard things as much as you can. Um, you know, People will argue whether or not that's mental toughness or not. I don't really give a shit. I mean, to me, it's like you should be constantly trying to just put yourself in a position to be uncomfortable. I'm not going to be out here trying to break any records anytime soon. It's not anything like that. But to me, if I'm not trying to, you know, keep getting out there and keep pushing myself and to see what I can do, then to me, and not everybody has to think this way, but to me, like I'm a fraud to these kids, right? Like to me, I can't tell a kid, hey, yeah, I know you don't feel great today, but we still got to hit 85% on squat. Like, and I don't really give a fuck how you feel. Like, I can't tell a kid if I don't do that. You know what I mean? And so and I think kids will see that too. If you're telling a kid, hey man, you can do way more than that. Like the bar's moving great. Like, come on, like you got to stop. You got to believe in yourself a little bit more. You have to get a little bit closer to that edge. You know, Kids will respond to that better if they know you do the same thing, right? And yeah, I mean, it definitely plays into it. I can talk trash to some of these guys and be like, look, I mean, I'll do that for five. Like, it don't matter to me. Like, so I think that's a big thing of it too. I mean, obviously that definitely helps, because you can kind of build that relationship. These guys are competitive, the most competitive people you're going to meet, right? So anytime you can bring competition into what we do, it's going to help them. So, yeah, to me, like I have to make time for them. I'll get up, I get here around 4:30. I'll train, I still sprint and still lift, still do everything. Like I'm going to do all that because that's what we're asking our guys to do, right? And to me, like if you're going to be a leader, you got to be able to back it up. And I think you need to be able to do the same thing and hold yourself to the same standard. And so I think I've always thought that's important. Like I said, I don't think you need to be a guy that's, trying to compete on the weekend and, break a powerlifting record. You don't have to be like that, but you need to be trying to put yourself through it and stay consistent you got to show the kids that, we can do it too. Like, like I know y'all got a crazy schedule. I got a crazy schedule too. Like I got to get here, got to train you guys. I got all this stuff to take care of after I got to go home. I got a wife and a daughter. Like, like this is life, like it's never going to get easier, like you got to find time for it. And I think it's important, so I can't really say that, pat myself on the back and say that it's something that I like have done. It's just kind of wired into you. And I think you can develop that over time. Um, but I think that's important. I think we sometimes we lose that in our profession. But I think the kids respond to it better. Like, you don't have to be the biggest guy, the strongest guy in the room, but you need to be able to back it up and you need to be able to do what you're asking these kids to do. And it's just really hard to ask a kid to do something hard when you don't ever do anything that's difficult.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Like that buy-in is helpful and kind of being able to relate to the athletes is super big too, because their schedule is jam-packed too. Like all the stuff that we talked about, like them going to the training room, obviously class, like practice, extra work, like film. There's tons of things, but if you have a goal in mind, that it doesn't get easier. Like you're still trying to climb and you add a family on top of it, you add other work obligations, whatever else you got going on at home, like you still get the same amount of time during the day. You got to figure out what needs to go or how you're gonna be efficient with that time to really schedule things. And at the end of the day, like some of these players are gonna go on and play professional. Like they're at the top of their class and like what we do as coaches, like obviously is not, we want to be competitive too. We want to do our own thing, but like hard is relative to the
Mm.
person. So like what we do and like how we train is still relative. Like of course I want to go in there and talk trash and tell every single one of my baseball players that my vert is higher than theirs because it is a lot of times. But I want to be able to at least be able to sit down and say, oh, this was hard today. I still got it in and really kind of have a basis and have a foundation to stand on when I ask them to do something that's hard for them.
Mm.
And I think that's like exactly where you're coming from with that too. And like I'm to the same way, like training is kind of therapeutic. Like
Yeah.
I'm definitely not the same person if I haven't trained that day or I haven't done anything. And it definitely affects kind of how I coach as well too. So to be able to get it out of the way and like and feel kind of invigorated when the team comes in is huge. What the like how much does that kind of mental approach kind of play when you're having conversations with athletes that are having like a hard day or like some of the ones that like maybe aren't as competitive or take competitive side like maybe too far because you've probably seen like tons of players in those different positions. Like how are you able to kind of have find time to maybe make some of those individual conversations or like corrections? Like how do you kind of take that approach to like really kind of get to know the players and be able to like relate to them? Because I don't know how it is now if you're just working with a single group of kind of position guys, or if it's any different, or you guys have your own group. Like how does that kind of work? Or do they just kind of gravitate to each coach individually?
Yeah, so when I first got here, we kind of split up. So like I basically had all the skill guys and quarterbacks. And that's really great because you really get to hone in on a group of guys. So you kind of get to know what their temperament is. You kind of know you obviously know from talking to the coaches, talking to them, like kind of what their background is, what this kid is like emotionally, things like that. And then from there, you can kind of learn to push their buttons. But I think ultimately, and Coach Hughes says this all the time, like you have to be the thermostat, like you have to be the guy that sets the tone. So I think that's another thing that goes back to the training. Like if I'm not prepared, if I'm not amped up and ready to go, like, and it doesn't mean being the loudest guy all the time. It just means if I'm not serious about this and prepared and I'm fumbling over my words, like if I'm not doing that, like if I'm not presentable and ready to go, then that's a problem. So if a guy's coming in dragging and I'm having a down day, well, then that kid's just going to continue to spiral. So I think first things first, you have to be consistent. And for each coach, it's going to be different, right? Like I can be an energy guy when I need to be, but to me, there's a time and a place. And if you're going to be like that all the time, it's going to drown out to the kids. So you have to be able to understand when to be high and understand when to come down, understanding what kids you can do that more with. I know there's some guys in my group that I can just talk trash with them or just say, hey man, that's it. Like and just say something small like that to them and it'll flip a switch. Other guys you have to kind of coax into it a little bit. And then over time it'll change. I mean, because the goal is you want kids to develop emotionally and behaviorally over time. And so how you approach that becomes different. A kid that you have to kind of, be patient with and work with the first year as a freshman, well, maybe he's grown a lot that second year. You got a little bit shorter rope with him. And now it's all right, hey, let's go. So you can all that stuff just has to be you have to be fluid with it. And I think, like I said, that's another big thing with the mentors is, seeing how different guys communicate. I've been around guys that are high energy guys. I've been around guys that aren't. I've been around guys, Coach Hughes is probably one of the best of them as far as knowing when to elevate things and knowing when not to. And you can literally feel in the group when the kids understand the gravity of what somebody is saying. And so I think that's important, from a group standpoint, because these kids don't want to be singled out. So the more you can address the group, the more you can address that one kid. Um, but yeah, like, if a kid's having a bad day or the kid's dragging, doesn't want to do it, or he's sore, this and that, you know, they're all going to get relatively the same message, but it's just how you present it to that kid. Like some of these guys just, you have to remind them like why they're doing it. Like some of them, like some of these kids come from really bad backgrounds. This is a life or death situation for some of these kids. Like, hey, this is me getting my family out of their situation. This is me changing the course of my family for generations possibly if I do what I'm supposed to do, and getting them to understand like that, it's not a every other day decision. It's a decision you have to make every day. And I think it's important. It's the same thing the coach talks about. Like we're going to bring you here and make you, obviously a better football player, but a better husband, a better father. Like that's important to us. And the things that you learn here about like putting away how you feel every day and doing what the work is, like that's important. And because when you have a family, that's what you got to do. There's your 2 year old's not really doesn't really care how you feel, right? So I think that's important for our guys to learn, and it's a unified message across the board here. Um, but yeah, I mean, you can tell by a guy's body language and things like that, and we try to make the work fun too. We want to obviously keep the guys focused, keep them disciplined, keep them detailed, but like this should be an environment you enjoy coming to. And not because it's easy and you're hanging out with your boys, but because I'm coming here, I'm getting better, I'm getting pushed. I can feel myself improving. My confidence is improving. Like this should be a fun environment to be in. You should feel like the people in here care about you. They care about your well-being. They care about how you're progressing. All that stuff. So I think that's important. We try to just check in with guys every day. Try to see, just before the lift, after the lift, just talking with the guys. Um, if they feel comfortable with that, then they'll tell you things that they're dealing with or whatever it is. But as much as you can, just check in on the guys and that way once it's time to go and the whistle blows, like, hey, we're going. Like, but we're going to talk about it and we'll figure it out. But we got to get this hour long lift. We have to get it in. Like, it's got to get done. We'll deal with everything else later. So.
Yeah, that's great advice. Like there's definitely times in your life you're gonna have to kind of put your feelings aside and really kind of put your head down and do the work. And like a lot of the stuff that ends up happening in sports like can be translated out to like everyone's personal life and like what it's gonna be like, whether or not you play professional football, if you just join the workforce or you're a husband or you have a family, like a lot of the intangibles, a lot of the character traits that you develop whether football or any other sport, like or it's in the weight room, like all those things carry over. So if you can do those things like to that high attention to detail, be consistent about it, actually like I mean, just everything we kind of touched on already, like you're going to be able to translate that over. And it's a hard lesson to learn if you do it wrong, but if you follow kind of what everybody is on staff is saying, and it's a unified message, then you can really do no wrong if you make those choices because everything is laid out for you at that point. And we're holding you accountable, and you've got 105 teammates to help you. You've got support staff, you've got strength staff, you've got everybody there, like that's in your corner trying to help you achieve the lofty goals that you came to like actually achieve. So that's pretty awesome. And I think you're right too. Like just those individual conversations, like guys are going to gravitate to different coaches. Like they want to see how invested you are. Like sometimes they feel you out. They want to see if they can really trust you, and not taking those conversations lightly, and also kind of remembering that it might have taken a lot of courage for someone to come up and talk to you. You might not know all their situation or what's going on or how deep of a conversation you might have just initiated by just like checking in on them that day. And it's hard with such a busy schedule and like everything we have on our plate to like really put in perspective, like this might be the most important thing I do all day. And it's to check in with this player and see what's going on. And it's hard to remember that like it's worth a couple minutes to do that, because that it might be very hard for them, and they might have a lot more going on than they allude to in practice, or they're hiding from their teammates or hiding from other coaches.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, like I said, you can tell, if a guy's down, like I said, there's some guys that, most of the kid we recruit great kids, and most of the kids don't have bad intentions. They're not here and being negative or whatever it is. So, you know, instead of coming down on that kid about, hey, why are you dragging around? Why are you doing this? It's like, I just make a joke with them sometimes, like kind of just poke fun at them, just sit there and mess with them, put a hand on them, like actually physically touch the kid and be like, hey, like, come on, let's go. And like a lot of times that'll fix it, and it'll at least get that kid through that workout. And then that kid's going to feel better after that. But, it's all about just, we have a standard of how we want to do things. And we understand not everybody's going to feel 100% every single day. So it's just getting them, as you learn the guys and you figure them out, you can kind of feel them out. And, we try to make a point too of like, if a guy is shying away or whatever, maybe he's not comfortable here yet, then go at the kid, go at him and be around him, coach him up more than a guy that you may already have a great relationship with, just so the kid feels like he's getting, attention, feels like he's valuable and that we care about what he's doing, because obviously we do. So
Yeah, that's a great point. Hey, I had a question for you too when it comes to like, obviously, like I don't want to harp on too much of the limelight and everything that goes on at Colorado, but like it's starting to become more apparent that like there are always going to be like a couple athletes that just kind of shine out more than others. And as like strength coaches, we always talk about like whether it's the last player on the bench or whether it's a star player, like we're going to coach them up, we're going to treat them the same, we're going to do everything we can for them. But like dealing with like a really high caliber player such as like Heisman winner like Travis Hunter, and then like on top of that, like having two-way players and things like that too. Like how do you manage kind of like the fatigue, the stress load, the workload with like some of these players? And like it's hard to put yourself in their shoes, between the pressure and the spotlight, like not only from just like the place that they're at, but like what they've got on their shoulders. Like is that conversations that you're having with them? Like, do you have to coach them differently or work with them differently? Or is it like kind of like I said in the beginning, it's just like, hey, you're one of the guys, one of the players, like you might have some unique things about you, but you're part of the team. We're gonna train this way.
yeah, I mean, it's funny you bring up Travis. Travis is, they say it all the time. He's a unicorn, and that's literally the only way to describe the kid in every facet of life. Um, I I worked with the kid the whole 2 years he was here. Spent a lot of time with him this past year. I mean, we did a lot of extra stuff, just, days that he wasn't practicing or whatever it was. Like, I mean, he was in here every day. Um, but like I can't take any credit for that. That's 100% the kid. I mean, he's a great person. Um, you know, like just knows what he wants. He's mature. But he did grow a lot from that first year. Physically, obviously, but you know, kind of the same thing. He's a kid that you have to kind of earn his trust. And kind of as we did that, it was like, all right, look, like we can really, one, take your game up if we can really dedicate time to this and improve. And then two, coach is telling you all the time, you got to stay healthy. That's the biggest thing. So what can we do with this other time, right? And the transformation he did with his process from the first year here to this past year, his Heisman season, was unbelievable. Like, he's here, the first guy in the training room every morning. He's here getting, I mean, he lifted 5 to 6 times a week throughout the season. And we're obviously not in here, doing anything crazy. It's more so just kind of maintaining his body and things like that. But like with him, that's obviously a very individual, situation. He's obviously was a really critical piece to our success last year. So things do have to be different with him from a technical standpoint, as far as, like we do got to get him in here more. We do have to do things differently. We do have to manage his load differently, but that's all because we have to get this kid to play on Saturday. But it's never a case of the kid, he was trying to get out of anything. You're always trying to hold him back, right? I mean, we'd come in, he'd get here early to the stadium and we'd lift before he'd go out to warm up because it would make he'd feel better. Whatever aches and pains he had would kind of go away. So, um, throughout this past year, him and I really kind of dialed in his process. But like I said, I can't take any credit for that. I mean, that kid he's really bought into it and he's really seen the value of it. And so it made my job really easy. It's just like, hey, let's do this. Like, let's do this. All right, how does that feel? Let's change this. As long as we're keeping you on the field to play, that's the biggest thing because that's how you're going to make money. That's how our team is going to win. Like, everybody wins in that situation. But yeah, like him and, Shador, like all those guys are professionals in what they do. Like, when they first got here, you wouldn't necessarily see them as a weight room guy necessarily, like other guys you'd see across the country. But it's all about, understanding, where these guys are, how impactful they are to your specific team, and then understanding like, all right, how do I get this kid from where he's at to where I want him to be, right? And I think both of them did an incredible job from the first year to this past year of really showing to their teammates too that professionalism. Showing up and being early to things, being on time, doing extra stuff, holding guys accountable, not just being the lead by example guy, like, or the best player, so guys should follow you, really taking on that leadership role. So it really just came down to like, all right, this is where they're at. Don't run them off. Don't, you come at some of these guys too quick and too aggressively. And it doesn't mean to lower your standard at all, but it means you have to figure out, earn the kids' trust. Like these guys are high profile guys who have been like that their entire life. One of them has a Hall of Fame dad. So it's like, you have to be able to communicate with those guys and get what you need to get out of them. And then over time, get them to understand how they can interact with their team better and how they can bring everybody together. Because if you can get your best players, you know, doing extra, working the hardest and then also holding guys accountable, it is really not a limit to what you can do. And that brings, cohesiveness, all that stuff together. So yeah, I mean, you obviously it does take you do have to have some type of, you have to be fluid with how you talk to some of these guys and how you interact. But ultimately too, a lot of these guys too will respond to, are you consistent? Are you going to give them a consistent message? Are you going to consistently help them? Are you going to consistently tell them what they need to work on? Like if you can figure out all that stuff, then get them where they need to go. But yeah, I mean, I'm really fortunate to be around two guys like that. I mean, um, definitely like hurts not having those kind of guys around. We're excited about this team, but yeah, I mean, it's no different. It's just you got to be smart about how you get them to where you want them to be, because obviously everybody's coming, and that applies to everybody. It's just guys coming from different schools, and they have different temperaments, different personalities. You know, you don't lower your standard, but how do we get you from point A to point B? Some guys are going to get there quicker, but you can't run a kid off. If you burn that bridge with the kid too early, which you can absolutely do, it's going to make it 10 times harder to get anything done. And then, you're going to drive them to somebody else. And then maybe that person doesn't have the same, can't do it either. You just want to make sure that you get it right the first time, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure like after hearing all that stuff too, like it's definitely kind of a big hole to kind of fix. And like it'll be an interesting kind of spring and summer season to kind of see what leaders kind of step up and how the dynamic of the team looks with those two missing. But That's awesome to hear that more than just leading by example. They're holding teammates accountable, but they're also the first ones in. They're doing all the extra work. They're asking for it. And I think you're completely right. Whether it's a higher profile athlete like those guys, or if it's an athlete that's really dedicated to what they want to do and they're determined with their goals, they want a coach that is consistent and can give them that help because they probably got people in their ear all the time, like trying to give them advice, telling them what to do. And they're the ones that kind of have to be the ultimate determinant. Like, who do I listen to? Like, who am I really bought into? Like, who does this all the time, or who's kind of like looking for some sort of transaction with all this? And it definitely does take a lot of time, and I'm sure it makes it more difficult, like with transfer portal and some kids like jumping ship. But I'm sure that more than anything, like the 2 years you had with them and other players see the interaction that you have with them, they see the transformation that he had, the success he has, and understanding like all the amount of work that they were doing with you and the rest of the staff there too. Like that probably inadvertently gets buy-in from some of the other players too. So it'll be definitely an awesome off season for you guys. It'll be interesting to kind of see how everything plays out, but that'll be it's definitely interesting to hear about all those guys and kind of how big of an impact they end up making.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they get a bad rap sometimes. They get because of the spotlight, they get a bad rap, and the they don't worry about it because I mean, we know who they are. We know who those kids are. I mean, they're great kids. Like I said, I mean, Travis is like he's a one of a kind of person. He's the kind of person you want to deal with. So, like I say, he was not a weight room guy at all when he got here. I think he maybe cleaned like 225, cleaned 300 pounds last year. So like he's I mean, he bought into it, and I think it gave him some confidence. Like I can do this, I can be physical, I can be, I can get stronger, I can do all those things. And that's important. But yeah, I mean, yeah, all that other stuff, I didn't have anything to do with that. He was just born that way. I mean, the kid could run all day and it wouldn't matter. So
That's cool. Well, I mean, there's enough. I mean, that limelight and being that young of an athlete at that age to like handle all that stress and pressure and just be able to kind of blaze through it. Like it's hard. There's enough armchair critics out there and coaches that are gonna pick and choose. And I can't watch sports talk radio anymore for them to just like critique 18-year-old kids
yeah.
like that are getting thrown millions of dollars and everything at them anymore. It's just it's a different sport altogether. So I don't blame any of the athletes for everything that goes on. Like I wouldn't want video of me at 18 anymore
Yeah.
when I was in college. So it's hard to imagine that there's that many cameras and this much exposure at all times with them, and for them to handle it like professionally in an organization such as you guys have right now, that's pretty awesome. So. Hey, coach, like any good training session, we end the show with a finisher. So I got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and maybe overtime at the end. But you can go rapid fire or you could take your time on any of them. You ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, first one I got for you. Biggest influence in strength and conditioning.
I mean, I'd have to say Connor Hughes. I mean, I've had great mentors. It's not to diminish any of them at all, but like um the quality and the standard of what he does is I don't know if there's anybody better. And so I mean I gotta credit a lot of, kind of what I do to his system and how he does things and how he approaches it. So he's definitely at this point probably the biggest influence for sure.
Awesome. Well, hey, when you're not coaching and competing, like you're not actually in the weight room, what are maybe some of your hobbies that maybe fall out of coaching and training?
Oof, not many now that I have a daughter, that's for sure. Um, no, I mean I like to probably the only hobby I have is I like to go shoot, so I'll go to the range and shoot and stuff. That's probably it. I mean, I like that just because it's a skill that you have to learn. Not into golf, so this is my expensive hobby instead of golf. So but I like it. It's a skill that you can learn and discipline and details and things like that and learning all the mechanics and stuff. So that's probably the only one and don't even get to do that very much. So
It's way better than golf though. I'll take one shooting day over 12,000 golf
Yeah,
sessions.
no doubt.
Hey, so if you weren't in strength and conditioning, you weren't coaching, what do you think you might be doing as a profession if you had to do it all different or had to change today?
Oof. Um, I really don't know. I think probably the only thing I would have done would have been join the military, to be honest. I don't I can't see myself doing anything, sitting behind a desk or doing anything like that. So I mean, I like being a part of a team, being a part of an organization, having some structure so I know what needs to be done, things like that. So um, I would probably do that. I mean, most of my family is former military, so that's obviously a big influence on my life. So that's probably what it would be. Hopefully I don't get to that point where I gotta decide on what I'm gonna do. So hopefully I'm still in this.
Yeah, you could always do both. I
Yeah,
don't
it's
do
true.
it's different. Hey, hey, so if it's 4:30 in the morning and you got the whole weight room to yourself, hey, what music is playing for yourself and like squat session, heavy sessions done, like what is the best post-training meal when your training session's done that day?
Hmm. Well, post-training meal, it could be anything. We have the best chef and, cafeteria staff up there. So really anything they got going on, I'm gonna go up there and get. So we get spoiled with that. We got crab legs one day or, steak the other day. So yeah, I mean, whatever they got, that's pretty much the ticket. So music though, that's funny because probably the best training partners I've had have always had the widest range of genres of music. Um, Colin Kenyon, he was with me at West Point. Uh, we would probably never listen to anything like that aggressive or, it wouldn't be like rap or, Metallica. It'd be like sad cowboy music or something like that. Like it'd be stuff like that. So that's pretty much what you'll hear. It'll be just me in here in the morning at 4:30 and it'll be like that. It'll be, I'll put reggae on. Like it don't matter. Like it'll don't matter if it's a heavy day, light day, like it's gonna be a wide range and it'll probably switch 10 times during the lift. I always joke with our guys because I hear the same 10 songs 14 times a day. So I'm like, I can't listen to rap anymore when I'm training. So it's got to be something different. So yeah, I mean, I just kind of put on whatever and just kind of goes from there.
Yeah, the ebbs and flows. That's the best way to do it. And yeah, you probably don't miss the Olympic weight room where it's just like from sun up to sundown, it's the same two playlists every
Um,
single day, whether you're typing away on Excel or you're training the team. It's like I've heard the same little baby song probably like 50 times today
yeah,
already.
exactly.
Hey, so last one I got for you for overtime. Either your favorite, maybe under the bar memory or favorite coaching memory that you've had thus far, or maybe just the first one that kind of comes to mind that like really sticks with you.
Um, oh man, there's a lot of good coaching ones, and none of them are in the weight room. That's probably the coolest part about what we do is like we see these guys all year and then, we get it's all for like the few couple minutes at the end of the season after the championship or a bowl win or whatever it is. And to me, all those moments are the biggest ones, like we won a Division II national title at West Florida. Like that was one of the most surreal feelings, went 5 games on the road in the playoffs, won them all, beat all these number one seeds, win the national championship. I mean, the amount of time and effort that we had put into that season, um, the kids that we were around, like you're making, a couple $100 a month. So, it's like all that is like, all right, this is what it's for. Like it's for these few moments right after the game. We've had countless here, with some of the close games that we've won. Um, I think those are the best ones. I can't really say it's just one. It's those moments like you put so much time and effort into this, you're away from your family for a lot of the time. You're traveling, you're doing this. there's the stress of, we have to perform, we have to do X, Y, or Z. And then these kids make a play and seeing their emotion, right? Like that's the best part. I think that's why we do this is like, that's what all these hours and days go into. You run up and hug that kid after he makes the game-winning play, right? Like I think that's probably my favorite one. I got so many of them, like those are huge, beating Missouri when we were at West Point in the Armed Forces Bowl, like only Power Four win that we had there. Like we had always been really close. Like that was huge. Like seeing those kids earn that. Anytime, we beat Navy and Air Force, of course, because you got to celebrate those. But so all those moments I think are kind of lumped into one. To me, that's what makes it all worth it.
Yeah, that it's a culmination of kind of all the hard work, and you spend a lot of, especially in football and like higher level like strength conditioning, when you're at every practice, you're at every training session, like sometimes you're in film, but you're on the road with all these players and everything. You know a lot of them pretty well. So it is really a culmination of all the hard work that you see them put in, but it's also like the staff too, like all the hard work to like try to get to one final goal and to see like they spread like this. They came to the school to play that sport and be successful. So for them to see the success and like have a big win, have a moment like that where like just everything just feels great at that point in time. And it's an awesome kind of way to like really showcase like all the hard work and success they have in like one moment in time. So definitely a cool moment. I've got a couple of those, and I couldn't tell you what the score is or anything. I just remember like what it felt like during
Yeah.
that moment.
Yeah, I got to throw in there too. Watching, Travis get the Heisman. I mean, I'm stressed out the whole day waiting for the ceremony to come on, and you see when kids put in, what kind of work they put in and everything. So, I mean, it's awesome. You see a kid like that get up there, accept the trophy. He's crying, he's emotional. I'm like, man, this is great. I mean, like it's awesome just to be like you can just be a small part in the kid's journey, and I think that's why we do it. I think that's why you should do it. You want the kids to get to where they want to be. And then when they finally get there, it's like, man, it's awesome. Like I've seen you at your lowest points, when you didn't want to do stuff or whatever it is. And look, man, I told you, like, you're gonna get through it. Like, I think that's the best part for sure.
Yeah, and like fans don't really get to see all that. Like maybe there's stories and stuff that are covered on everything, but when you're not behind the scene, I think that's why like Hard Knocks and all those shows like have such big success because people want to peek behind the door,
Yeah.
but it's still edited. Like all the stuff that we end up doing, we get to see really the highs and the lows and like really the human element behind everything. So for success of an athlete, like to win an award like that, or for a team to like have a big victory or win a championship, like we know all the like structured like team like suck and sacrifice that went into everything to get to just this single point that people pay to come watch or tune in to watch. And we're kind of besides us and like the athletes, we're really the only ones that really know all the time and effort and energy that went into that success. Or sometimes like sometimes the biggest ones are maybe that loss at the end too. But
Yeah.
it's it's definitely kind of live by the sword, die by the sword, but it's why we do the profession. So
No
definitely
doubt.
cool, man. Hey, well, for anybody that's got any follow-up questions for you, maybe like want to follow along on the journey, like everything you guys got going, getting ready with spring season, getting into summer, and then next fall, where can they get a hold of you and maybe reach out?
Yeah, probably best place, Instagram or Twitter. Oh, X, forgot we're calling that something different now. So, I think Coach Brandon Reyes on Instagram and then Coach B Reyes on Twitter. So, um, yeah, I mean, that's probably the best place. That's where, we put, a lot of times I'll put stuff out that we're doing if I get a chance or kind of highlight some of the stuff that the guys are doing every once in a while. So, that's probably the best place for sure.
Awesome. Hey, well, man, I appreciate you taking some time out to come visit with us and share with the audience. I know you're in the thick of that off season, so your time is valuable. But I can't thank you enough for coming on, man. It's been a blast talking to you and hearing what you guys got going on over there.
No, I appreciate it. I really appreciate the opportunity to get on here and talk. Love being here. Love the staff. Just anytime we can kind of brag on these guys and brag on our staff, we want to take that opportunity. So really appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Well, we'll keep in touch and good luck this the rest of the spring.
All right, thank you.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.